Hello, everybody, and welcome to Summits with a Purpose in conversation with Deshun, and it is episode 18. So, for those of you that are watching live, thank you for joining us. And for those of you that will watch it a bit later, I hope you enjoy what we have to share and also maybe learn from some of our insights and some of the fun that we've had and some of the misfiles that have gone on. So let's start with Deshun. Thank you very much for making time. I know you're on holiday, having fun with family, but you've made time to talk to us or to talk to me. So tell everyone a little bit about you. Who is Deshun?
So the thing about Deshun is that I was born in the Eastern Cape in a place called Uitenhage in South Africa. It's a very small town. It's an industrial town. Most people there, since, especially when I was growing up, were sort of employed by the big corporations like Goodyear and Volkswagen. So my parents were working class, very much working class under the apartheid system. And, I suppose the thing that got me interested in the mountains from the get-go is that we actually lived on a hill. If you've ever been to the Eastern Cape, and especially that side of the Eastern Cape to Uitenhage, you'll come across a lot of, they're not really mountains, but when I was little, they were mountains. And I was always very mesmerized by, they were sort of green and then they'd become sort of blue and gray but like stretched on and on and on. And so I was very curious about these mountains and I asked a lot of questions about them, but, as you grow up, and especially in the 70s, I mean, the adults didn't really like children who asked a lot of questions. So I was always told that we were little monkeys before we came to our families, and that, some brave person in the family went to fetch us from behind those mountains. They always gave us some kind of crazy story or the other. But yeah, I was a curious child, and I like to tell this story because that's really, I suppose, what ignited my interest in Everest in particular, but in climbing in general. I was growing up mostly spending time with my grandparents, my mom's parents, because their house was quite close to our primary school. So we used to live during the week at my grandparents' and then walk to the primary school. So they kind of looked after us. And also my mom had 2 jobs at the time. And my dad was a bricklayer, so he often worked, in other parts of the country, in other provinces. So he'd be away for months on end doing his job. And so we spent a huge amount of time with my grandparents. I like to tell the story of how my grandmother is actually responsible for my interest in Mount Everest, because she was very, very into the British royal family. Now, the Eastern Cape has a huge British influence in it. And so my grandmother, she worked in hotels that were owned by English people, and eventually she was a nanny, and, it was just that kind of time. And when Princess Elizabeth came on tour with her family, one of their visits was PE, Port Elizabeth. And my grandmother was one of the young people in the crowd who waved at the royal family. And so, I mean, I'm going on a long story here, but it really is what influenced my life. So I'm going to tell you. When Elizabeth left South Africa and went back to England and all of that, I mean, my grandmother was she couldn't believe she'd actually seen the royals with her own eyes. And so the reason Edmund Hillary connects with us is when Princess Elizabeth became queen, it was in the same week that Edmund Hillary got to the top of Mount Everest. So she got coronated in the same week. And in fact, I grew up with pictures of Elizabeth and Prince Philip up in the house. And so, this whole connection of the royal family and Edmund Hillary, and it's just stories that I grew up with. And eventually I've got a cousin called Hillary because of that. And I suppose I must mention that I'm now married to a man called Charles.
Okay. I guess you're taking it on.
But anyway, so the Edmund Hillary story really resonated with my curiosity. So I knew about Mount Everest from a very, very young age. And so, of course, by the time television came to South Africa, every 5 years, National Geographic would have some kind of updates on what's happening on Everest, and they'd always go back to that first expedition, and so I kind of started looking out for those, when the next National Geographic documentary of Everest going to come through, and then I also had a very strong interest in a character called Tintin.
Oh yeah,
and Tintin was like my absolute go-to if I wanted to escape. So I had a stack of Tintin books, but it was called Keifie back in those days. So it, the comic was called Keifie se Avonture. And Heidi was also like really strong in my life because I suppose she was the only girl I knew who lived in the mountains or something like that. But I really loved Heidi, and so if you look back now, I can see that I always gravitated towards things like that, either in my imagination or just in terms of what I thought was something exciting or something to aim for. It was all just fantasy back in those days, because in the apartheid years, you couldn't go to anyone, never mind your neighbors, to ask if anyone knows how to climb Everest. So I had to get my fix through, magazines and documentaries and these kind of things. And eventually, when I was a teenager, we used to do a lot of church camps and like youth camps and stuff. And we'd go off to some place where you could pitch a tent, and the girls would always be buttering rolls in the kitchen, because that was our job. And you'd see me kind of saunter off to the guys to go and check how they're pitching tents. So I kind of always knew that somewhere along the line I need to learn these skills, this pitching tent thing. And the guys always go back to the kitchen, all the girls are there. And eventually, as an adult, I joined a hiking club, because I was really starting to edge my way towards living this adventurous life that I'd always thought about. And we did a number of really great hikes in South Africa. This was in the sort of early 90s, I'd say 92, 93, round about there. Did quite a number of really nice hikes in South Africa, Blyde River Canyon, Drakensberg, just a few that were kind of at that stage open to us, because as you know, the laws didn't allow us in before democracy into a lot of these places. So anyway, off we went, and I remember standing at the top of the Blyde River Canyon after one particular hike. It was quite a long one, the Fani Bota or something like that. And I remember looking down into that canyon, and in that moment, I was so awestruck by the size of this thing and the beauty of this thing. But I remember saying to myself, this is not enough. I need something with ropes. Because, hiking just walking. So I was like, no, I actually, this is great. I'm getting my fix, but I'm going to have to find something where I'm hanging from a rope, And a couple of years later, serendipity, I was opening up the newspaper on a Sunday, and there was this article about the first South African Everest expedition to Mount Everest. Now, this was in 1995. I was like 25 years old in a couple of months. And the first thing that struck me is I can't believe that no South Africans had actually been there. Up until that point, I didn't know that we weren't allowed because of, sanctions and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it literally was like if your destiny is in neon lights flashing at you.
Yeah.
That was that moment.
Wow.
And I just remember feeling like a sensation, like I have to find out about this expedition. And I went through all the information, and there was just so much there. There was about the cold and about the history of it and about the people who died. And, there was just so much information there. And all I could think while I was reading it is, where's the contact number?
Where do I start?
I know, I swear to you, I was like, even if I have to go and make them a cup of tea, I want to be there. I want to serve these people, And lo and behold, at the end of the article, there was an entry form which then asked, for women to sign up. They were looking for women to join the team, and they had 3 criteria. The first criteria was that you had to be a South African citizen. The second one was that you had to be between the ages of 25, and 55. And the third was you had to be physically fit. And at this stage in my life, I was a human movement science teacher. I sort of studied, I became a teacher, and I was very sporty. I was involved in sports administration and all of that. And I just couldn't believe how the criteria were designed around me. I know that sounds like egotistical, but I just, when you see something that here's my chance, that was it, and so, that's the long story short. We went through a couple of selection process. Myself and Kathy O'Dowd eventually became the two women to go with a group of guys. And that's how I ended up on Everest in 1996.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful story. I think I always say, visualize to maximize. If you want it badly enough, see yourself at the top of the game, whatever it is, or your goal, and hopefully to manifest itself into reality. That's exactly what you talked about. You look at it and this is mine, and you go for it without any doubt, and you get it. So thank you for sharing that. Go ahead.
No, sorry. It's not even like it was so clear to me. I just knew it's something I wanted to do, and I just kind of had this feeling that climbing is in my destiny. That as an adult person, my life is going to consist of stories about climbing. So at that stage, it wasn't about breaking records. It wasn't about anything. It was just I had this thing from my childhood that compelled me to pursue opportunities that kind of took me into that direction. I feel very blessed that I was able to do that at such a young age.
Yeah, somebody says there's an echo and they think it's potentially my mic. Okay. I'm going to try and fix that while you touch on the next thing, Deshun.
Okay.
So you find yourself on Everest. I just want you to maybe take us through, this is Women's Month. How was it for women then compared to where we are today? What did you have to face then in 96? Maybe let's talk about early 20s. And what about now? Is there any difference at all?
Wow, that to me is such an important question. I think the one thing you can say that's different between then and now is that there are far more women now than 24 years ago. I'll give you a case in point. So statistically, when I was on Everest in 96 and Kathy O'Dowd, it was very unusual to have a national team with two females in it. Now, back in those days, when I say national team, people still used to climb for their country. There are very few people who do that now. Now it's all commercialized expeditions, and that's fine. It's just how it evolved. But back then, you still had like the Danish are sending a team and the Chinese are sending a team and the Singaporeans and so on and so on. So it was very, very unusual to have two females on a national team, never mind just one. So, we were very aware at the time that the South Africans are kind of showing the world what inclusion looks like. But even then, the ratio, Sarah, was 1 in 67. So one female for every 67 men on the mountain. And so you can just imagine, we were so few women that we all had tea one day and we could fit into one team's mess tent. Kathy and I hosted a tea for the other females in base camp, and there was a lady from Malaysia, and there was someone from Japan, and there were two Americans, I think. But it was so crazy that we all could fit into, those who could make it could fit into our mess tent. So we were 14 on the entire mountain in 1996.
At Everest Base Camp?
At base camp, but women who were climbing, not just not trekkers.
Wow, that is amazing.
And, the other thing also was interesting enough. I suppose now, when I think about it now, I'm like, it's so weird that Kathy and I used to go into shops to look for women's gear, and there was nothing. Today we can still find that things are out of stock and whatever. but there was nothing. I climbed my first 10 years. The only female items I could find were fleece items.
Yeah.
And maybe some underwear. But I mean, my first 10 years of climbing was mostly in male gear, you know, because they just didn't even think about catering for females back then. So yeah, that's how things have changed. At least we can find our things in pink now, which is great.
Or light blue.
Pink and purple or light blue or turquoise, you know.
I'm trying to fix the echo, so never mind my fidgeting.
No problem.
And in terms of the males that you were climbing with, did they see you as an equal? Did you find that you needed to kind of behave in a certain way to be accepted, or you were kind of imposing yourself onto the expedition?
You know, it's hard to not talk about the first South African expedition without getting controversial.
Controversial.
As dramatic as possible. So, you know, Kathy and I were the two women on the team. At that stage, we had Ian Woodall, Bruce Herod, Andy de Klerk, Andy Hackland, and Ed February on the team as the men. And we were pretty much ignored by Andy de Klerk, Andy Hackland, and Ed February.
One that can make an impact on your events.
The reason for that was they didn't think we deserved to be there. We were not selected based on a long CV of climbing exploits. And I mean, Kathy had more experience than I did. I was quite literally a little green shoot. Okay. But Ian's stance was that unless you bring someone who is not in the mountain club in, you'll end up with an all-white team. And we were climbing for the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Children's Foundation. We were climbing for a New Democratic South Africa. We were climbing for the Rainbow Nation. And at least Ed February was there. But then they were like, we can't just have one person of color on this team. And so obviously one of the main reasons he had the selection process was to give everyone a chance to have access to this opportunity. And so it's not like he just plucked me from the township and put me into the team. I still had to go through a selection process, right? But I mean, people were just so upset about this concept. We got so much flack. Why did you not recruit from the Mountain Club of South Africa? Now, I mean, historically, the Mountain Club of South Africa didn't allow people of color. So I wouldn't have made it in. I mean, Ed February, who had such a stellar climbing record at that time, a rock climbing record, he kind of was allowed in type of thing based on his exploits overseas, you know. He was often chased away when he tried to climb with his white counterparts on the routes that were here in South Africa. So it was kind of a distortion of you know, why people would allow us in and not allow us in, especially me. And so obviously now we're in this team, and these guys with their incredible experience in climbing. Look at these two women who've just, you know, look like they've been through a beauty contest to get in. So Kathy and I were largely ignored by our teammates, not Ian and Bruce so much, at least. With Ian and Bruce, I could have a proper conversation, but the other guys didn't even look into my direction, you know. Oh. And when they did, they were patronizing, and yeah, it was not pleasant.
And how has that evolved over time? Delia, I've fixed the echo, I'm hoping. Please give me feedback. Thank you, everybody that's joined us. To Sunny, Delia, Monto, everybody, thank you. And there's some lovely comments that I'll share with you the time if you can't see them. I still can hear the echo. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I can also hear it. I wonder if it's not on my side. Do you think it could be on my side?
But when you speak, I'm not hearing it. It's when I speak.
Oh, okay. It's when you're speaking that there's an echo, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get through it. Sorry about the
Sorry about that. And I see Tashi. Hi, Tashi. I see Napo is in the house.
Hi, Tashi. Dashi, you better keep a space open for me, eh?
Absolutely. Yeah, Delia, sorry about that. I have to go on. Deshan is clear, she says it's me. But anyway, Deshan, how has that changed over time? And at what point did you see, because you continued to climb, I mean, you went to Denali, and you've done quite a bit, Mount Meru and so forth. Did you see that changing? Was this attitude just about Everest and that expedition, or did this actually manifest itself in all the other climbs to 96?
Yeah, you know, Sarah, I thank God for you, because at least they're you, me, to me, and a couple of others now. Because there was a time when I was the only Black woman climbing in the world, and it was tough, you know. I look back at it now, realizing how tough it was, but I was so gung-ho at the time. I just used to make it go off my water off a dog's back type of thing. But it was tough, because, you know, historically in South Africa, our race relations were not where we saw each other as equal. And so even though I got invited onto teams, I wasn't always treated like I'm welcome there. And I'm aware of that. I'm aware that I was a box ticker, and I fit into two boxes, woman of color and woman, or person of color and woman. I was aware of it when I took on those invitations. I knew that I'm there to create that kind of dynamic. But I also had personal ambitions for climbing. So I wasn't going to be, you know, sort of like, oh no, I know you're only picking me because I'm a Black woman and I tick these boxes. I genuinely wanted to climb those mountains, and here's my chance, you know. Yes. But that did make it very, very hard. I found climbing in particular there was a short period of time where I did about 5 or 6 expeditions that I found very hard. I found in my team some hectic racism, some hectic gender stuff, you know, that doesn't belong on a team of equals, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And I had to climb through it, because my personal ambition was strong enough for me to not feel like a victim under those circumstances. I knew why I was there, so I could kind of just take the knocks, you know. But it wasn't easy. I mean, I think South Africa, we've come a long way. But certainly back in the sort of 90s and 2010s, sorry, even before the 2010s, so those sort of early digit 20s, we still had a long way to go to get away from filtering people through race. And so that was a tough journey for me. But, you know, I did it. I signed up. I climbed. I did my best. The weather didn't always play along, which is so damn frustrating.
You can say that again.
But, you know, I did, and I managed to build a climbing CV for myself in spite of those things happening, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. So let's go back to some positive stuff. A woman on a mountain, and you need to pee. So you squat or use a shiwi? What's your preference?
Just say that last thing again.
Do you squat or you use a shiwi?
Oh, yeah, I started out squatting, but it's not comfortable. And the problem also is with the men's things, you can't, I mean, the zips are all in the wrong place, and, you know, it was just a nightmare. You know, this one time I was on Elbrus, my first expedition to Elbrus. I assume your whole audience here are climbers, so they're not squeamish about these things. But so my fleece was a woman's fleece, right? So it had a half moon shaped zip at the back. But my Gore-Tex salopettes were men's Gore-Tex, because I couldn't find women's Gore-Tex at the time. So I had this full-on salopette with a vertical zip, and I had this half moon underneath it. Oh my God. I tell you, and then I had the runs on Elbrus, because my stomach is the one thing that always gives me problems when I'm climbing. I had the runs, there was a blizzard, it was hectic outside. I had to leave the tent. Oh, I don't want to go any further. You know, you're in the storm, your eyelashes are frozen already, and you're trying to get these two zips to like align with each other, and the runs don't wait. That's why they call the runs. So, So
anyway, so of all
yeah.
the mountains that you've climbed, Deshun, which was the hardest, the most satisfying, the one that you would love to go back to just for you, not guiding other people? Yeah, the one that you would repeat over and over.
You know, there are two mountains that I really enjoyed climbing, and I'll start with the lowest one first. Denali is, you know, after Denali in was it 2002?
Yeah.
I called myself a mountaineer. I was like, yes, you know, because by then I'd climbed Kilimanjaro 2 times, Mount Kenya, Mount Meru, and I've been halfway up Everest, and you know, but Denali tested me on such levels that I was like, even if I don't get to the summit this year or on this mountain, I will call myself a mountaineer when I'm done here. And you know, that was really my kind of homecoming for climbing. And and I would say Everest. You know, how can one have done Everest, and in my case twice now, and not come away with your life profoundly impacted by it? So it's hard, it's long, it tests you at every level, it's disappointing, and still I think Everest has a very, very special place in my heart. Yeah.
I'll
go back.
How many of the 7 have you actually summited?
I've only summited 2 of the 7, even though I've been on 5.
Okay. And when do you plan to pick up and go to the next one? Or do you plan to do
as you know,
not for everyone?
As you know, 2020 was going to be that year, hey, of going back to Everest. And yeah, you know, we had a plan, and we were hoping to be the first team of a full South African female team to get there. And it didn't work out for all sorts of reasons, but obviously COVID happened, and you know, funding was hard to come by, sponsorship and so on. So yeah, the plan is still there, but it didn't materialize this year.
Okay. So have all your climbs been sponsored?
I have largely climbed sponsorship wise, but I think I've become wise now. You know, nobody wants to sponsor anymore, so there has to be other ways of getting the money to. I mean, I suppose there still are sponsorships out there. It just depends on who you're talking to and how risk averse they are and all of this. But I was fortunate enough that the bulk of my climbing career has been based on getting the sponsorships to do it.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you think that's changed? Was it easier to, you know, get funding in the beginning and now more difficult, and why?
I don't think it was easy, number one. And I think I was fortunate. I was in a window period of time where companies were, South African businesses anyway, were still starry-eyed about Everest. They're not anymore. It's now like, oh, Sarah's done it. You know, this one's done it. Sibusiso, Alex, everyone's done it. Why must we now give you money to go and do it as well? So,
the echo. Delia, give me feedback. I think I did. Yes. Sorry, Deshun. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. So I think there was a time when it was a kind of the next big shiny thing. You know, a team to Everest or even the 7 summits, and that's all been done now. So I think the sentiment about sponsoring Everest expeditions, but also the charity thing has also been done now. So now I just like, it doesn't taste well in the mouth if you go to a company and say, we're going to do this for this charity and that charity. And it's not that it's wrong. It's not that there's something wrong about climbing Everest for charity. It's just that on a commercial side, the way it gets perceived. Yeah, I don't know. It's my opinion. I was also fortunate in that the teams that I had joined at the time had sponsorship when they invited me. So there were 1 or 2 opportunities where I got sponsorships myself. And it was difficult. It's not like it was easy, but I just happened to sort of like get into the slipstream of what those companies were looking for at the time in terms of branding and marketing and stuff. But it has changed. I think the sentiment commercially around sponsoring people has changed. And it's not like sponsorship will dry up completely, but I do think maybe we've got to become more creative about how we get it.
Absolutely. I can tell you from my experience, it's really about the return on investment. I was wrong, it's still there. The companies want to see what's in it for them. It's not just the logo going up. Is it, whether if their strategic objective sales, how many sales are they going to generate because they've invested in you? So it's no longer about, the pride of the country or the pride of anything. It's about, how does it affect our bottom line, literally? And what So that's where, at least from what I've seen, I haven't really been sponsored that much, except for my partnership with Momentum now, and part sponsorship in 2014. Other than that, I sent letters and just ignored them. And like, I want to do this so badly, I'm going to invest in it. I'm going to go my holidays and whatever the case may be. Anyway, let's go back to you. Training. How do you train for these mountains then, and how do you train now? How do you keep yourself, fit? Can I ask you a question? Is your Facebook on?
My Facebook?
Yeah.
I can put it on quickly.
No. If it's on, put it off. If it's not, that's fine. I'm trying to figure out why it's echoing, because it's never.
Oh, no, it hasn't been on. It hasn't been on.
All right.
Yeah. So how did I train? Once again, in the 90s, we had no idea. We literally had no idea. So the one thing I was told is I have to gain weight. I was the skinniest thing you've ever seen. I was like a bicycle frame. So I was told to put out at least 10 kilograms on my body. The second thing was just be fit, and I was fit already. I cycled, I swam. I wasn't a big runner, but I did some of that. And I just did more. I had no clue of like which muscles, and it wasn't scientific back in the day 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to like bulk up. So I'd go into a restaurant. Just picture this: the skinniest person you've seen. Go into a restaurant, order 2 large pizzas. And it's like, I mean, the waiters couldn't believe what they were looking at. I had to force feed myself. So I eventually gained about 5 or 6 kilos, but it was just so hard. Not anymore. Now I can just wake up and be 5 kilos heavier. But anyway, so there was no science to my approach to training and getting myself ready, nothing at all. By the time I did the 7 Summits campaign with Alex and Sean Disney and Sean Wisedale and those guys, we fortunately, Discovery Health was our sponsor, and so they were like, we're going to do this the right way. So they got us involved with the Sports Science Institute, and we were like these little lab rats running on treadmills with, these masks attached to check out, go to max, and, all of these things. So that was quite fun, and we had nutritionists to tell us exactly what to eat, and, so that was great, because I finally had an idea of how you prep as a mountaineer. And I kept a lot of those principles for my future climbs as well. But of course, it's even transformed from that now. I watched a guy called Stephen Bock in Australia when he started prepping for his 3rd Everest expedition. The guy was hectic. I was like, I don't train like that. And he'd already summited before. And I thought, gee whiz, I better get my act together, and train a bit harder. But this time around, I started about a year before, and I like to do incremental. I don't go hard sort of straight away. And so eventually, by the time we were 2 months away from Everest, I would be doing 3-kilometer swims, not 3 kilometers in one go, but 1 kilometer swims 3 times a week. I would do like a 10K run, at least one 10K run a week, and then break it up into sort of 4K, 5K, those kind of, because I don't like running. It's not my biggest thing. And I would then be in the gym sort of 2 hours a day doing functional training, strength training, and just, the stuff where the muscles that need to be used get conditioned. So I do that also 3 times a week. And I find that perhaps because I'm so much older now, that I trust a lot more in my body. I trust a lot more in what my body knows about what it needs. So I don't overcompensate with my training. I trust that the prep I give it is the right kind of prep, because someone else will do something different, but I'm not comparing anymore. I mean, I know with a lot of exercise what I've been able to achieve in the mountains, and with little exercise so I've kind of figured out my body has a specific way that it is when it's at high altitude. And I train towards the best that can be.
Yeah. That is interesting. I just want to go back to something you said about things have been done, and you also actually did not know that the South African community was not allowed due to sanctions to be on the mountain. In 2013, until 2013, I actually did not realize that you had not summited. Are you aware that there was a lot of perception that you had actually summited based on how it's communicated? And did that worry you, or it didn't get to you?
I was so annoyed at that whole thing, because I don't like those titles, and I don't judge people who do. But because I was the first Black to put foot on Everest, on the slopes of Everest, some person wrote it in an article, and that article made it into this newspaper, that magazine, that. And before I knew it, every time I got interviewed, that's how I got introduced, before people even checked with me. Now, people don't check with you, eh? I mean, journalists can just pick up from another journalist. I'll give you this case in point quickly. My name is Deshun. There's no Y in my first name. One journalist in 1995 put a Y in my first name. And it took me years and years and years and years to tell people I actually know how to spell my name. That's not how you spell it. But to this day, people still call me Deshun Deysel. It's that kind of thing. It's like, it's a relentless thing to correct people all the time. And I often to this day, I often find myself going, I'm cringing because I'm being introduced as a speaker, and people say first Black woman to summit Everest. And I'm like, when is this message going to get through to people? And it's that one person in 1995 who wrote first Black woman to set foot on the slopes, and it just transformed into this. And people love to put these little things, these distinguishable things on you, and it's annoying. It is annoying. And I often, just recently I spoke to an audience, and one of the questions was, so what's it like on the top of Everest? I've just told you in my whole talk that I reached 8,300 meters. And in the questioning, it's like, what's it like at the top? And then I have to tell the audience again, well, actually, I reached 8,000 meters. The mountain is 8,800. Sarah.
Anyway,
so when you celebrate, people were like, oh, but Deshun, who is this woman? Aren't you the first? And I was like, oh my God. I had to educate people so much after you came back from Everest last year. But
that's crazy.
People love that. They love to put us in boxes, and they like to make it appear like there isn't enough room for everybody. Yeah. And I don't know if they do it deliberately or not deliberately, but there really is that kind of sentiment, that why can't we all? I mean, how many white men have been to the top of Everest? Nobody's ever made a big deal about, oh, but so-and-so has done it now. No, absolutely not. I mean, generations of Black girls after you and me need to be able to get to the top of that mountain.
Yeah. Sorry, Deshun. I think what you did in '96 is important. What Sophia did as a first Black woman to summit Everest is important, because it says to somebody like me that, hey, it's possible. I think it's the context that it's put in. I think representation is important. If you heard me talk about looking at superheroes and thinking, but they don't look like me. Maybe it's not.
Exactly.
What Black Panther, it says, oh, Wakanda, I can be a superhero, So I think representation is important. I think it's the context and the authenticity and the accuracy of the information that is out there.
Absolutely.
So what does adventure mean to you?
For me, adventure is curiosity combined with a bit of risk, combined with, let me show people what I can do. For me, my very, very first nature is curiosity. As a child, it's the one thing I got in trouble for the most, is that I just wanted to figure out how things work, what happens around the corner. My mom says she could have seen it coming because they used to look for me as a child, and I'd be up in a tree. We had a big blue gum tree in the front yard, and my favorite place to play was high up in this tree. And I would be on the top of the roof. I was that kid. Constantly, people were worrying what's going to happen to me. I was also a very sickly child, so they were very overprotective, but I didn't know that I'm supposed to act like a sickly child, so I just had this very curious nature. So curiosity is a very important aspect of adventuring. But you must also have a high risk appetite. There are loads of things that you and I are prepared to do that millions of women would never, and I don't know if it's built into us, if that's naturally how we're supposed to be, but I think I missed that boat.
No, everybody's got their own thing. Somebody was talking about, I'm part of this campaign, She Owns Her Success, which I'm very passionate about. And I always go and say, you can't own your success if you are not prepared to own your challenges, and many times it's almost like I do 3 Everest expeditions, I don't work out. It's okay to ask me over and over for years to come upon it. Then I do one where I summit. You want me to talk about it, but not too much. But it's over now.
I know.
Like, why?
Doesn't that annoy you?
Actually, I also felt like, okay, but I was raised to be humble about my successes.
I know.
What is that telling the next girl? Telling them that, tone it down. But then the boys can go on and shout. This is why, if you look, Banyana would be doing so well on the second. But we're not screaming about it hard enough. We should, because they're working just as well. And it starts with me acknowledging. I don't need to talk about it, but accepting my success and saying thank you when you say, well done, or it was just, no, I worked hard and I've got it. And I'm allowing you to actually celebrate your success. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much power in that, because one of the last things we as the women of color in the climbing community need is more kind of comparison and division and whatever. We're such a tiny contingent anyway, and we need to show the world that, number one, we are working together. There's no, when Kathy, I don't know if Kathy said this to you when you interviewed her, but people were trying to put us as competition of each other. And there was no competition. I was happy for Kathy to be the person to go further than me because she had more experience, right? It was just a logical decision. But again, newspapers would find the story, and, there's a cat fight between Kathy and Deshun. We were both looking at these stories going, oh my word, like, we're having a cup of tea together, laughing at how the newspapers tried to put us against each other. When Sibusiswa and I were on Everest in 2003, we encountered each other once. I was on my way to Camp 2, heading to Camp 3, and he was on his way back down to base camp. We spoke for 10 minutes. It was the first time we learned of each other on the mountain. And so here we are, and we chatting quickly. How's your climb going? How's my climb? He misses the food. He wants some pap. And anyway, so we had this lekker exchange between 2 Africans on Mount Everest, And because we had met, someone said, oh, Deshun and Sibu finally met each other. Oh, my word, some very nice, ambitious, sensationalist person decided to print something about Deshun. Is there romance blooming on Everest? Anyway.
Oh, my God.
I said live to a radio audience, I said, number one, I know Sibusisa is married. Number two, there's no such time for things like this on Everest. But it's because we were the only 2 black people on the mountain. So now she's a female, he's a male, and I think the world will keep doing that. And we have a responsibility towards each other to always correct it. Yeah. Because we need to show the next generation that this can be done. We can all be in the same space. We don't have to compete. We all have our own journey, and we can celebrate the other person's journey. That's really the crux of it.
And there's a lot of learning from each other that happens, which
Absolutely.
we do not see. It reminds me of my encounter with a South African, well, he claimed not to be South African, during this past Everest expedition, coming down from my rotation in the Kumbu ice field. We have a queue because somebody's fallen into a crevasse, some woman. And I didn't actually see her, but I was waiting. And she comes out, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, it's me," with a heavy Pretoria accent. And then I said to the woman, "Oh, excited, I have a South African flag back." I'm like, "Hey, are you from South African?" You know, it's this excitement when you see South Africans. This is like I saw Molly and teams in 2015, and I got excited, and they had lots of data. And this woman, Deshun, goes, "No, I'm not I'm ex-South African." And I'm thinking, whatever. And now I'm like, whatever. Like, this is the only time I meet an African on the mountain. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you again. But anyway, let's go back to you and your time, Stefan. One of the things that I totally admire about you, I would love to learn from you, is how you've taken your clients and turned it into tools to help other people achieve their goals through your business. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so interesting enough, my training has been in people development. I've done a lot of training in South Africa and abroad with regard to teamwork, leadership, diversity and inclusion. I'm involved with a couple of international organizations in terms of working through what performance management looks like today. So many years ago, I was working for an organization, and I could see that some of what we were teaching was changing people's lives, but we didn't have a way to measure to what degree we are changing people's lives. And they were saying, well, it's hard to measure that kind of thing. I mean, how do you measure someone's had an increase in motivation, in intrinsic motivation, or an increase in resilience? And, so I set about trying to prove that it can be done. And so over time, I also noticed that leadership in business happens a lot to what I've seen leadership on mountains, and specifically as it relates to when that transition started happening from people climbing for nationality and now people climbing on commercial expeditions. And because 96 was such we all know what happened on the mountain in 96. Hollywood makes a movie every 5 to 7 years. It's been well written about. Harvard Business School actually created a case study around the leadership that happened on the mountain that year. And then I started talking about, well, it's not just about the leadership, it's also about the followership. Because if you look at the South African expedition and how we made decisions as leaders within ourselves, but also being guided by guys like Ian Woodall, and how the Rob Hall, Scott Fisher expeditions chose to do things, there were stark differences there. And a lot of it didn't just hang on what the leaders were all about. It also hung on how equipped the followers were, what autonomy they had, whether they were handheld or whether they could decide for themselves what kind of approach they're going to have. So over the years, because I've worked in corporate in a number of different industries and looked at what they're struggling with, I could see such correlation between what the mountains have taught me about leadership, followership, teamwork, self-preservation, things about goal setting, that I've designed some tools with the knowledge I have on the people development side that plug into some of the experiences I've had as a climber. So 3 products that I've trademarked is Tackling the Summit, which most people know as a motivational talk, but it's actually a strategy, built-in strategy into Tackling the Summit as well. Imprints in the Snow is about the leadership, followership stuff. And then Peak Performance Toolkit is about performance management and how you integrate that, especially now, that people are so remote and so diverse, and They're all over the place. How do you get a team to function well and properly when the going gets rough and when it's time to do high risk, high reward goals? So you and I now know that with the way we climb today, you get like a Canadian, a South African, a New Zealander, a British, 2 Dutchmen, a German, a Korean, all in the same team. And we all have to have our own personal goal, and we need to have our own internal strategy for that goal. But we also need to have a team strategy to, summit. And there needs to be some kind of line of reporting and leadership and so on. So I take all of those things into account when I work with teams, and I kind of give them an insight into how climbing works and what Everest is like to climb. And then we go through a lot of fun activities, almost like a simulation of sorts, to help them understand how you bring all those elements together to get your strategy underway and to actually then, reach your 3-year, 4-year, 5-year goal. So it's fun, it's taken me a long time because the management consulting world, once again, it swings towards our pale male counterparts. So over the years, I've learned that you just get partnerships, and I've got some really strong partnerships with various consulting firms where I can plant my product. I've landed obviously quite a lot of my own work, but it still is one of those things where if you don't have the partnerships, it's very hard to, and it just takes time too. I mean, most people start like that and eventually you establish a brand for yourself. Yeah, but what is funny about that is that people don't know that's what I do. They just see the mountaineer who talks about climbing, like motivational speaker. So it's been so annoying. But the bulk of my work is actually where I wrestle with teams and how to be more effective,
Yeah, that is awesome. So how has motherhood changed you? I mean, this is Women's Month, and when you started, you were single, not married, actually, not married.
It was so nice. I had such a lock up and go lifestyle. I would just put my finger on the map and pack a bag and off I go. It was so awesome. I got married when I was 39 to a man that I dated in my early 20s before climbing took hold of me. And so the two of us got back together sort of late. So we literally were just clicking close to 40 when we rediscovered each other and got married. But so I became a wife and a mom in my 40s. And so I had all of my 20s and all of my 30s to own property, travel the world, do my own thing. It was tough. It was a very tough transition. And especially becoming a mom, these little ones are so dependent on you being there. I actually, for the first 2 years, I was quite resentful of the process. I couldn't believe how much I couldn't just leave the house and go do what I wanted to do. And I remember coming across Alex Harris one afternoon in Hyde Park, and we were just chatting, and we were both sort of, our kids are more or less the same age, and we were both sort of, it's so hard to be parents and you can't do what you want to do anymore. And he said to me, for instance, I've only been able to climb Kili 4 times this year. He says that to me. And I'm like, I can't leave the house for 30 minutes. Oh gosh, I was so mad. I was like, Alex gets to go to Kilimanjaro 4 times in a year. And I'm like, and that's the difference. I mean, that's the difference. You can be a dad and still go do these things. I remember when Mandy Ramsden finally did her last summit, I was busy breastfeeding and I'm like, oh, look at that. She can climb, and it's just that thing. It's that thing of acknowledging that your life has fundamentally changed and you better get a grip, So I remember consciously deciding that I need to give myself time to be in mummy season, or I was going to go crazy. I was always going to feel like there's something out there that I'm supposed to be doing, but now I'm a mum, And so I think God just convicted me in a moment of weakness, and he was like, hey, get a grip of yourself. But I had to make a conscious decision of saying that thing isn't drawing me right now. I'm a mum and I've got to focus myself on these 2 young lives that are so dependent on me being around. And the last thing I wanted, Sarah, is some kind of public success, and my family is just not doing well. So I had to ask myself some serious questions around what's really important in my life. And that's what anchored me then to say, you know what, this is temporary. It's not for long. There are mothers out there who are climbers. My children are just not old enough for me to sort of go off and do that. And I'm still not sure if they are, but I did start my Everest. I want to do the 7 summits. Let me put that out there. It's definitely still on my horizon. It's boxes that I must tick for myself, if no one else. And the kids are starting to be old enough for me to feel like I can at least get away to Aconcagua, or I can at least get away to. But if Everest is on the cards and it happens, as you know, if that money comes through and the timing is right, I'm out of here.
So talking about Everest, you were meant to go in April 2020. And you talk about an all-female expedition. What do you understand that to be? Because I talked to Billy, and she was like an all-female, is it led by Shikanis and stuff like that? What is your understanding of an all-female expedition?
Yeah, for us, it was a marketing decision, really. We looked around and realized that we're women. And 3 of us were very involved in entrepreneurship. So our whole thing was, how do we use the thing that's closest to us, is that women entrepreneurs in South Africa still get a raw deal. How can we highlight the plight of women entrepreneurship? And it's something that we can all speak to. So, it was us climbing as a group of women representing women, climbing the sort of startup mountain or the corporate mountain or whatever it is, but it was definitely related to women in business and us being women representing that. And we thought it's a great story. So as you said earlier, you send the letters, you give the ROI, all of that, and people loved it, but we just could not get the traction. And Sarah, sometimes I look at how things happen in life and I go, God kind of He puts obstacles. And because it's me, I actually say to God, if you don't want me to go, put an obstacle so great that I can't get over it. Yeah. Because if I get obstacles, I just find ways.
Make it
I go under, around, over. I'm a bulldozer like that, So I think I didn't pray for COVID-19, so don't get me wrong. But I think it literally just became that thing. Everest is shut. You can't go. And I trust in that. I just trust that. Absolutely. I'm not resentful about it. I don't look back on it and go, I've wasted all my time and whatever. No, I look at it as just another little cog in the machinery that works towards the thing, So I will go. I know that for sure. But I'm also humble enough to just stand back and say, okay, God, you open up the pathways, because I've just learned a couple of things in this life that, sometimes I try to bulldoze and it's not the right time, or it's not the right thing. And, I'm just going, I'll keep myself fit. I'll keep looking for opportunities. I'll keep finding little corners here and there where I can, put my desire out there. But it will come.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought about when I was on the summit of Everest is how all those big doors that I thought were shut in my face were actually little windows, and they left the gate wide open, and I walked right past through. I think that's it about life, One of my favorite verses that I've mentioned before is Jeremiah 29, verse 11. It says, I know the plans that I have
for you. Yeah.
So good. And sometimes we don't understand, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But He knows what's best. So
that is absolutely. And I often feel like it. I mean, I don't know how much our audience will understand this, but I've always been very uncomfortable with being called the first Black woman. Mm-hmm. And it's probably because I resent the distinction, because nobody ever says the first white this and that and that, And so I'm kind of like, really, do we have to highlight the Blackness of someone's accomplishment? And then you came along and I was like, sure, this girl owns it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm unapologetic about it. It is what it is. You know?
No, but that's the thing. And I was like, I can see what God is doing here. His title is going to someone who owns it, and I'm like, sure, that's great. Because it is a kind of thing where your destiny and your purpose have to align with what is also true to you.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely obvious in your life, when it comes to your mountaineering and the things you stand for and the things you've always said that you want to do. And our journeys have been different. I mean, I started like 2 decades ago and I was young and I was having to forge my way through apartheid mindsets and stuff. So I've always kind of resented the fact that people point out that you're not one of us. And I think some of it is in that, that first black thing was always kind of like, don't act like I'm not one of you guys, because I am an equal. And you flip the whole thing and you're like, yes, I'm not one of you guys and look what I can do.
I think if I don't say it, it doesn't make it any less truthful, Like you, initially when I started, I actually didn't like it. I put it in the letters when I'm asking for funding because funders, I thought, would like to be associated with faith. But after I saw, I just had this thing to say, if there's no representation, then people say, this is not for us. I guess one of the reasons is because I'm not really going to mention names. They say to me, nobody that looks like me, no black woman has done this. Maybe get a male to take you.
I've heard that so many times. Oh yeah.
Me to say the males did it on their own. You didn't ask them to get there with some women to escort them. What makes you think I actually need to be accompanied by a male, or I need to be a different color to be able to do that?
Yeah,
I think it's unacceptable. Anyway, we're almost coming to the end of our time. But what advice would you give to a younger Deshun, knowing what you know today?
What would I say? I'd probably be a bit more gentle with myself, because at the time I just used to try so hard to not be seen as the other. I mean, it was so crazy, Sarah. I used to be on mountains and then these people would like climb past me and it didn't matter how dangerous it is. They'd drop everything, take out a camera, and the cameras were bulky back in those. It wasn't just like a little phone or something. And they would literally stop and go, because they just never see. And I felt so awkward about being treated like that. Like people are just stopping to see, like, what is this black thing that we've just noticed walking or climbing past us, And it happened so frequently that I started to like feel quite awkward about being not like everybody else. And I would be more gentle with myself in terms of, I became self-conscious about it. And I don't think it helped my climbing very much at the beginning. And I would also advise myself to be patient. There's a bit of patience that's required in climbing, but there are also times when you have to be completely impatient. And I don't know if I've got that balance yet. But yeah, I just would not try so hard to blend in.
Yeah.
Because I tried to blend in, and it was just, it's not lekker. You kind of realize to some degree that you're not being true to yourself. And that your blending in is actually not even helping, because now it just looks like you're trying to be like the others, but you're not, and they can see it and you know it. And, I would just go straight in and be Deshun and not try to, to do the other things that, I used to be so, I used to want to speak like the guys, when they talk about what they've done. Oh, and then we went, and then we did that, and then we went, and I'm not from a background where we can say things like that. I don't have a daddy with bucks to just send me on a sailing trip, and, and I tried to sound like that. And over time, I realized, actually, that's not authentic. I need to find my authenticity, and I finally did. But I would try to say to myself, do that a lot earlier. Yeah. It's okay.
That is a gift. I think that's why I say I'm unapologetic. I'm going to own my challenges, allow me to own my successes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I'll allow other people to own theirs as well. So Metsi says, I hear you, Deshan. It can be a bit patronizing when they use the color. I'm assuming that's what she's talking about. Yeah, she's also saying thank you. So what is next for you as a last question? I know COVID-19 has put a bit of a stop to a lot of things, a lot of your plans. What can we expect from you in terms of your climbing world?
Yeah, so I want to continue my trajectory. I was going to do Aconcagua at the end of last year, and then I sadly lost my baby sister. So she passed away, and it was just in that time, and so therefore I couldn't go. Everest, COVID-19 happened, so therefore I couldn't go. So I do have a list of mountains that I must tick off, and that's the remaining 5 of the 7 summits, and I will do them. So I've given myself the next decade to pursue that, and you know, I'll be satisfied if I go back and try at least one more time. And we'll see from there, Sarah. I'm not necessarily attracted to the poles and the South Pole and all of that, but I think my big dream is to finish the 7 summits because I owe it to myself. I've been on them. There are 2 I haven't been on, but I owe it to myself to go back to the 3 that I need to return to.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. If there's anything else that you want to add, please, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, so if people want to know more about my business, go to www.gopeak.biz. So Go Peak International is a combination of all the stuff I've talked about in terms of helping companies with their teams, with leadership, and now people analytics play a big role, which is an area that I've been in for a long time. And yeah, just go poke around in gopeak.biz, and you know, it's not a completely full website yet because we're still developing quite a number of concepts and working with some partners to bring it to fruition. But you'll get an idea of how I've connected my mountaineering experiences with what's happening in business.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you once again, Leanne. Thank you for joining us. And
thank you so much.
Let's do this again.
Yeah, thanks for the platform. It's been lovely to chat to you, and we definitely should do it again sometime. Maybe I'll interview you next time.
Absolutely, why not? Thank you, everybody, for joining us, the people that will watch this after this. I hope you enjoy that and you learn a few insights from Deshan. And if you want to touch base with her, she's given her...
yeah, I'm on Facebook. Just find me on Facebook.
Yes, and she's on social media. You can follow her. Thank you and God bless. Bye.
God bless. Bye.